This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. Since the 1970s, Dover has been an entitlement community as named by the Department of Housing and Urban Development at the federal government level. That means that Dover receives a grant every year from the federal government to help those in a lower economic strata than the normal poverty level. Today, we're going to talk with Dave Carpenter, our Community Development Coordinator, and Ryan Pope, our Housing Navigator, about the work they are doing on our consolidated plan, which is sort of our guidebook for 5 years of expenditures and activities that the Community Development Block Grant Program hopes to achieve here in Dover. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good morning, Chris.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well, Dave. You know I'm doing better than well, actually? Because you've been here 9+ years, and this is the first time we've gotten to focus on you here on the podcast. So we've captured you, which might actually mean we've captured everyone in the planning department. So welcome.
Thank you.
Dave, why don't you expand, if you can, on the CDBG program? I gave a little bit of an overview there, and feel free to correct me if I misspoke. But talk to the listener about what it means to receive this grant and how nationwide it is.
Sure. So the federal government has a program that is referred to as the Community Development Block Grant Program, CDBG, and it has provided funds for 50 years now to actually every county in the country. There isn't a geography in this country of ours that hasn't benefited from CDBG funds. In New Hampshire, as in other states, there are certain cities that are called entitlement communities. Dover is one of those. What that means is that we as a city receive funds directly from the federal government to be used as permitted in their program, but we get to add our own focus to those funds, I would say. Every 5 years, we develop a 5-year plan or consolidated plan, and that works as kind of a overarching guide as to where we're going to focus, to the extent that we can, the funds that we receive every year. There are entitlements across the whole country that do the same thing every 5 years, as well as counties and then states. So you can be in a state and you can live in a city that's not an entitlement or in a rural area and can still benefit from CDBG funds. The program really started during the 70s when there were a lot of inner cities drying up, a lot of rural towns folding because perhaps in this rural area there was one employer and they packed up shop, they closed. And while it didn't provide 100% of the jobs, it might have provided 30%, and that's enough to have a city close down. So that would be an example of where these funds would be made available to that community to perhaps tear down and clean up that old mill site so that then another employer or other business could come in, utilize that site without having to first pay the costs for, say, making that site usable. And the cost would be so great that the community in itself would not be able to have done so on their own. And in cities such as Boston, Detroit, Chicago, we can just kind of imagine those are so large that there can be sections that face the same reality. But there are small jurisdictions that aren't several hundred thousands of people or millions of people, but say 30,000, 40,000, 25,000 that face similar issues as well. And we're one of those. And we've been benefiting from these funds for just about as long as the program's been around.
So the fund, I've got to presume, well, I know, but it's good to presume sometimes, that the formula that they're based upon creates a sort of unknown factor and that they don't stay stagnant. They might go up and down, and I know there's been some drastic downs and some positive ups. But do you know what goes into the formula, what the factors are?
The formula is one of those realities that I think there's only 4 or 5 people in the world who really know.
Like the Coke formula?
Yeah, exactly. It's a formula that's been around since the program was created. And if we just think about the communities around us, how much they've changed over 50 years, the need, say, of a Dover or Portsmouth 50 years ago was different than what it is now. But the formula hasn't changed. So if someone were to come into the picture now and say, why does community X get more than this other community when they're the same population? And this first jurisdiction is is doing really well, but yet they're getting more than this other one. It's entirely based upon the formula that was set up for the realities that were in place at the time in the mid-'70s.
So Ryan, Dave just mentioned that Portsmouth's a community as well. There are a few others. Can you let the listener know what those other communities are?
Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but the cities are the city of Portsmouth, the city of Rochester, the city of Manchester, and the city of Dover, and the city of Nashua.
So there are 5 entitlement communities in the state. We all go through this process. We are looking at, as you say, Dave, the 5-year plan. Ryan, what's involved in the consolidated plan? What are some of the aspects that we're looking to report on or plan for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what really drew me to participating with Dave in this 5-year consolidated plan process, it's very similar to me as the city's vision planning process, where we get to kind of take a step back every 5 years and reassess the way the program is working, and then re-engage with our community to make sure that it's still delivering on kind of its intent. Going into this planning process requires a lot of community engagement work that has already kicked off in a lot of ways. So if folks were out and about on Apple Harvest Day and popped by the planning booth, you would have seen me with my big old sticker board asking the community, what are the greatest challenges that Dover faces? We have an online survey running right now. We'll be doing some targeted outreach to area service providers, some city departments, as well as hosting public listening sessions through the months of December and January at our elementary schools, city hall, library, housing authority facilities, and things like that.
This plan and the efforts you just described really is wide-reaching. It's not focused or targeted on a specific demographic. You really want input from all gamut of residents here in Dover.
That's correct. One of the things we'll do when we're, for example, in addition to reaching out to the general public, we will meet with service providers who are content experts in what they do. And we want to hear from them, not just the challenges and opportunities that they face within their own jurisdiction or within their organization or within their building, but also in their particular industry, if you will, in particular. So if we talk to a director of a homeless shelter, we want to talk with them about what are they facing, what do they see coming down the road, but also within that larger service of which they are a part. And then what we'll do is we will say, step outside of the role that you play as the director of this program or as the facilitator of this program. Answer those same questions that we've just asked you in your role as a member of the PTO or as being on the bowling team that you're on. It gives them permission to take the knowledge that they have in what they do every day, but think of it as a Dover citizen, or think of it as someone who lives outside of Dover, but services Dover citizens in the role that they play in their 9-to-5 job. And we found that that is a way to get from them issues and topics that they might not have otherwise thought of providing to us. And the wonderful thing about those pointed conversations is that then when we go to talk to a next content expert, we have a little bit more to stand on because everything's connected. It doesn't matter what you provide as a service, what your role is in this community, whether you benefit from these funds or not. The concept of a community is that everything's connected. Everything relies on everything else. And we're only as strong as the weakest part. And so this program hopefully assists in addressing some of those weaker parts, less vibrant parts of our community, of our culture. And so it's important that we talk to as many people as we can, content experts or otherwise.
The contact experts that you're talking with, I presume they fall into the main 2 buckets that the expenditures go towards, which is public services and public facilities and economic development. Is that's safe to assume?
That's correct. And for those of us who still get confused at all these terms, even if we've been doing it for 9.5 years, public services would be a category of funding. Think of it like operational expenses. So we would provide organization X with a certain amount of funds to help them keep the lights on. And public facilities, think of it as construction, a new roof on the building, or purchasing a piece of property to build a new shelter, something like that.
It's the operating budget versus the capital improvements program for here in the city.
That's exactly right.
So Ryan, what are some of the outreach? You mentioned the sticker board at Apple Harvest Day, and you mentioned the survey. What are some of the goals you're hoping to reach with those outreach activities?
Yeah, absolutely. So as is the case with all of the community outreach that I'm doing, we only know as a city what we know. So it's important just to get people to tell us what they see and give us some feedback to to start addressing those things. And whether they can be addressed with the community development block grant program or not, it's still solid and good information for the city to have. So I guess some emerging themes that have kind of been coming out of those conversations, obviously housing and homelessness remains a major issue in terms of affordability, in terms of support for local agencies, in terms of boosting shelter capacity and things like that. Another big emerging theme that is consistent year over year, consolidated plan over consolidated plan, is housing quality as well. So items like energy efficiency, lead abatement is an issue of public safety and also of increasing importance at the state level. And accessibility is another huge issue for housing quality specifically. We have a lot of old houses. We have a lot of old mill buildings. They are of a different time where people were less concerned about people who were less mobile. So a lot of ways that we can be considering utilizing these funds or utilizing other city programs or priorities, items like that, is just kind of looking into that issue, making sure that people can get around, things like that. And then the other piece is the economic development angle. Obviously, support for small businesses, job creation, job retention, that downtown vibrancy that we all know and love and want to see continue.
Dave, if memory serves, which it could not, but when you came on board, we were wrapping up a consolidated plan. And so you got to the tail end of that, if at all. It was probably more of a, Chris, you did what scenario, because your predecessor had left at the beginning of that process. I'm being generous there. And then in 2020, you took the lead on doing the plan that we are now wrapping up. What are some of the changes you see in either the structure of the plan or the requirements that HUD is looking for in the plan or in that time frame?
Well, in no particular order, the current consolidated plan, which expires in 5 or 6 months, we were jumping into the public outreach phase just as the pandemic was hitting. And so much so that I have memories of being in school cafeterias and wondering if they didn't want to come because of the subject matter or because it was me or because people were starting to realize this is a thing.
Yeah.
So we did receive feedback. The online stuff was critical. That's a hopefully once in a generational issue. So that was a significant reality then. You learn from your past successes, but more from your failures in that sense. So in this case, we are digging back through, mechanically speaking, notes from the last time we went through. And so I've been in the program as long as possible and have only had to do the consolidated plan once because, as you said, I came on just after it got adopted, like a month or so after. So
you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. And it's like, how'd you do this anyway? So one of the issues that we face is very appreciative of the fact that we get the funds that we get. And it's this not intended to be any type of a criticism at all. But if you were to think of it this way, and it's really not fair, but if you were to think about the intent of the program, the federal funding is to a large extent address housing needs. And I say that with a small a. It's not necessarily just building new housing, but all housing needs. And while it's true there's never enough money in any situation, the amount of funds that we get, which is very, very helpful, is not enough to be able to go into a particular part of the city and say build new housing. As a matter of fact, with this particular pot of funds, you cannot build from scratch new housing. You can use funds to rehab an existing building or to provide assistance to homeowners who qualify to repair their house. And the idea being there, and this is pretty specific, is if we can help people stay in the house they're in, then we as a community don't need to help them find someplace else. So part of the challenge with every consolidated plan, I think, that we will be working on here in this community is what can we do with the money that we have? And as staff, and as a history nerd myself, I try to avoid the phraseology that I remember coming across once from one of my favorite history professors, which was, generals always fight the last war. And I remember being in class with my head down and going, what? And I sort of raised my hand. What do you mean they fight the last war? And it's one of those, terms of phrases. And he said, by the time a general has evolved through the ranks to get to a point where they can affect change, where they can make decisions that will have an impact on their soldiers for the next several years, their experience comes from when they were in the trenches 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so they're basing their decisions on old knowledge. And so as staff, I think it's really important that we not fall into that trap, which is why going out and listening and maybe asking some pointed questions when necessary is so critical, so that we don't just fall into, well, clearly the needs that we've identified in the current consolidated plan are still valid. And it may be true that they are, but it doesn't mean that they are the priority issues anymore. That's what's always going to be important every time.
Ryan, can you walk the listener through the future steps? We're in the data gathering stage now. What happens from there?
So the data gathering, community engagement will definitely be an ongoing piece. It will take, obviously, some time to engage with all of these organizations and host these public listening sessions. In the meantime, we're reviewing census data, we're reviewing other data that's been provided by Housing and Urban Development, as well as reviewing previous plans to really start thinking through what demographic changes we might have seen and how that will impact this consolidated plan process.
And then, Dave, I presume you need to have a new plan adopted before the other plan expires, or at least right in line. So you've done the data gathering, you're doing the analysis, you write a plan. Are we thinking that that is then adopted springtime, or what's the time frame for that?
So that's exactly right. We will, while we're constantly evaluating the data, so to speak, as we collect it, because it helps informs the two of us and the rest of the staff as to where we should be going. Are we missing anybody? We will be having 2 public hearings. One will be in front of the planning board, theoretically by February, and that will be the first opportunity for the general public to come out and provide comment. We will make the plan available, and clearly a draft plan. We will make that available before that first public hearing. Will be advertised in all the usual places and then some, but it will likely be February. And then the planning board's public hearing, when that closes at some point, maybe that actual meeting, maybe the next meeting, they will make a recommendation to the city council. That's where we would, as staff and as the planning board members, will receive input from the public, make changes that are felt, wise and necessary. And that then new modified plan, if at all, will then go to the city council, again, for another public hearing. Same thing, anybody can come out and comment. It will be made available before the public hearing. At that public hearing, once the public hearing is closed, the city council will at some point, again, maybe that night, approve the plan as presented. And if we think of that as a document, that document would be provided to HUD along with a lot of other procedural requirements by April-ish. And then HUD will have 45 days to review it and get back to us and say, yes, this, what did we mean here? Those types of things. And then it becomes an operating document as soon as the city council approves it. And it's, I'd say, 90% of the way there in terms of how we function. We require Housing and Urban Development, HUD, to review it and say, yes, it meets all the federal requirements. At the same time that we are going through this process right now in real time, we are also accepting applications for the next round of funding. So it is every 5 years, we're doing 2 things at once. We are developing and approving the 5-year plan and also approving the year 1 spending plan or action plan. So it's a little busy.
I can see.
That's why there's 2 of us on it.
It's strength in number.
Exactly. Of course, do you want to be a third? I don't know.
I've been there, done that, Ryan. We couldn't afford T-shirts, by the way. Ryan, you mentioned the survey. Can you let the listener know where they could find or participate in that survey and where they could find just general information about the CDBG program and the consolidated plan?
Absolutely. So the survey is up on the planning site as of right now. There'll also be some work to make sure that it gets out through other public avenues. So leveraging the chamber as well as various city newsletters, the Dover Download, and the Planning Review.
Great.
And things like that. But any feedback is welcome feedback. It helps us grow and helps us be better.
I appreciate you both coming in today. Is there anything you want to leave the listener with?
First of all, thank you for having us. It's a great opportunity for us to start getting out there in that sense. As Ryan mentioned, you can contact us anytime. And if we don't have the answers, we'll find them for you. but we will get back to you. One of the unfortunate realities of going through this process is that there will be created through this process a list of needs, a term of art that HUD uses. And from those list of needs, we have to generate priority needs. Through that very concept, we can't address all of the actual needs identified. And it's a tough task that the community goes through to prioritize what do we think we need to address, what is most important, balanced with what resources do we have to make an effective change. And both things matter. We may not have enough funds, we just may not receive enough funds from the federal government to address priority issue number 4. It's just too large. Doesn't mean it's not important. It just means we cannot effectively address that. We will not ignore it, but that may be a situation where to address that particular need over the next 5 years, we may need to partner these funds with other organizations or other sources. So I just want to make sure that there's an understanding that when we start providing funds, there's an understanding that it's the best that the community can do, and we lean heavily on the providers because they are the experts. We're kind of that middle point. We make sure the regulations are met, but annually going forward, it's those folks who are really good at what they do, that make a difference on a daily basis, that we want to be able to help them do their job.
Well, I think that's been a great introduction to the Consolidated Plan and the CDBG program, and I appreciate you both coming in today and recording with us. Have a great day.
Thanks.
You too, Chris.
As we wrap up the year, most boards, committees, and commissions have less meetings, not more, but that doesn't mean that they don't do anything. Today, we're going to chat with Erin Bassegio of the Planning Department to talk about what went on in the land use world, and Brian Early of Media Services to catch up on everything else. Brian, why don't you start us off and tell us what's going on in the non-land use world here in Dover?
The school board has been meeting since mid-November with a focus on adopting its fiscal year 26 budget. It has to deliver that to the city manager by January 15th. They've had multiple workshops, and right now they're looking to maybe adopt the budget at its Monday, January 6th meeting with a fallback adoption date of Monday, January 13th. So that's been their focus for the most part. The Joint Building Committee, which includes members of the school board and the city council, has also been meeting, working with their project to rehabilitate, improve Dunway Field at Dover High School. In December, they held a joint workshop with the city council and the school board to review the plans and the estimated costs for the proposed Dover High School athletic complex, which looks to upgrade Dunway Field, track, the grandstands, and possibly the baseball fields. Subsequently, in one of the city council meetings, they held a public hearing on a resolution that would authorize nearly $16 million for bonding for that project. Following the lengthy public hearing, the city council took no action on the resolution, seeking additional information from the Joint Building Committee. The Joint Building Committee met following that meeting to begin discussions of what their next steps are. Regarding the city council, they had one meeting in December. They took quite a bit of action on the waterfront. They awarded the waterfront pavilion building project to Pinebrook Construction, which will be partially funded through a federal land and water conservation fund grant through the state's Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. They also authorized payment to CJ Architects for construction oversight of the pavilion building. They also authorized the city to partner with Eversource to complete the electrical installation. And I believe, Chris, they're working to put everything underground in that area.
Right. So the project itself has always been designed as an underground utility project. That's part of our site regs here in Dover. But the additional scope includes transitioning underground from the inbound side, so the downtown side. Some of those overhead wires will go underground as well, as opposed to the original plan, which was to go overhead across the river and then go underground on the project site. So this is part of our continuing efforts to put our utilities underground downtown. We did work on that along Chestnut Street and Washington Street a few years ago. There's plans to do Henry Law Avenue in the coming year. So this is just all part of that larger project.
Looking ahead for the city council, they'll hold a workshop on Wednesday, January 8th with the Solid Waste Advisory Committee to review its recommendations regarding the future of the city's curbside, trash, and recycling collection and disposal.
Brian, do I recall that the city council also approved the capital improvements program at its December meeting?
Yeah, at the December 11th meeting, they actually approved 3 resolutions for the FY 26 to 31 capital improvements program. One is just a 6-year planning document. It doesn't hold the city to anything. It's just, hey, this is what we plan to do going forward. And then they also did a resolution on the bonding for the first-year projects and another resolution to transfer capital reserve funds for the non-debt finance projects. So all those were approved. The JBC had hoped for the bonding to be included in the CIP, but with the city council action, that's going to be pushed out at least a year.
Sounds good. Erin, I don't know that I've remembered a planning board meeting that went as long as the planning board meeting in December. I was just thankful to be sitting in my cozy jammies at home and not there.
It was a very long meeting. It went almost to midnight. So I appreciate everyone that stuck around and had their voice heard at the meeting and were patient with us throughout the process. They just had the one meeting in December. I'll try to summarize that meeting as best I can, starting with a site plan that was approved for the library. That's involving their renovation project, which will take place over the next year. 2 lot line adjustments were approved. A request was heard to waive impact fees related to a previously approved project. The board actually directed staff to work with the applicant on that proposal to restructure their payment plan. And that was related to the cottages at Back River Road. A conditional use permit that was endorsed by the Conservation Commission this month related to some wetland buffer impacts for a residential project on 4th Street that was approved. Again, it had been previously endorsed by Conservation Commission this month. And an applicant presented a TDR site plan for feedback for the board. They weren't looking for approval at this meeting, but that's for a project at 103 Court Street. That is for 7 dwelling units at the site. The applicant, again, they were seeking feedback, so there were some discussions between the applicant, staff, residents, and the board about the project, feedback given to the applicant. And in the end, at this point, the board decided that a site walk was needed at the site. So that's been scheduled for January 11th.
And that site walk, anyone can attend that. It's a public meeting in the sense like technical review where people can attend, but they can't ask questions. They're not participating. It's just the board that participates.
That's correct. So that is scheduled just like any other meeting. So if any abutters or residents are interested, they can check out the city website for that agenda that's posted for the site walk. The actual item was tabled until the January 28th meeting, so we'll be able to give more information on that in the next review. Another TDR project, a TDR minor subdivision, was approved at 566 6th Street. This proposed a 3-lot minor subdivision and 3 single-family homes, one on each lot, one of those being existing. This proposal had come before the board in a different iteration and had been denied. So this was a reduced proposal with a smaller number of units. And again, this proposal was approved by the board. The board recommended against granting a rezoning request for a parcel on Middle Road. That proposal would ultimately need to be approved by City Council, but the board recommended that it not be approved. And finally, a conceptual conditional use permit and waiver were approved to support a subdivision yield plan that would allow up to 31 potential lots at the project site, which is at 210 Tolan Road. So any future proposals for that site would still need to come back for technical review and planning board review. This was just for the yield plan for this proposal. And going back to a couple other meetings, the Arts Commission met. They are currently working on fundraising for a sculpture project that we've talked about before on Central Ave. If anyone's interested, they can go to communitively.org or pick up a donation envelope at the planning department in City Hall to donate towards that project. And finally, I mentioned the Conservation Commission met, and they did endorse the conditional use permit that was approved by Planning Board this month. And they also approved 2 expenditures from the Conservation Fund, one involving an appraisal for potential conservation easement, and the second towards the city's purchase of a parcel for conservation purposes. So those were exciting approvals.
And I'm going to guess that the Conservation Commission and the Open Lands and the Energy Commission have met to meet their new staff members.
That's correct. We have 2 new staff members in the planning department, Alexi Merchant, who will be focusing on kind of our energy commission, energy side and resilience planning for the city, and Michaela Edgecombe, who on the conservation side will be providing staff support for the Conservation Commission and Open Lands Committee. So we're very excited to have them on board.
Great. We are excited to look forward to 2025, and I wish you both a good end of the year, and to the listeners as well. No more meetings for us, so we'll be back in January with an update of what happens then. Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week, or other newsletters that we have, by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.